Hello and welcome to the Co.Lore podcast. This is episode 2, and today I have a very special guest from OpenEye Global. OpenEye Global. I can't speak on my own podcast. It's Bryan Meszaros. How are you, Bryan?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I am doing really well. I really appreciate you doing this with me. I wanted to reach out to you because I saw you talk at the AV IT Summit. And you did something really cool in the beginning, and I think you gave some people some history of the stadium that they didn't know existed.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy that likes to tell stories about spaces and about how you can use technology to kind of connect the dots. So how did you get into that? How did you get into storytelling and technology?
I think it is pretty much organically. I think everyone, you kind of jump into the space and it's your sort of entryway into it is either some type of interactive app or digital signage or visual media. And then as your journey progresses, as a business, as a practitioner, I think you're always trying to find ways to differentiate yourself from everyone else. And I think we had a bit of an opportunity at some times to go down this path of seeing where one engagement was just not enough to really bring someone into the environment. And then you realize that one leads into another. And then this whole thought of multiple engagements can lead to an element of storytelling, whether it's through a journey or even in some cases, then you kind of realize that maybe just even the progression of media itself within a contained square and screen can also be a representation of a story to where you can lead them along this journey and getting more in depth and more connected to the brand. So I'd say it was more organic growth. It was, wow, we can do this or we can do that. And that's what led us down this rabbit hole of learning and figuring out more ways to be more creative in the way we tell stories or bring people into the space and connect them.
Yeah, it's an interesting move because, a lot of times, when I'm talking to other technology companies or AV integrators or AV companies, things like that, they really try to separate the two. Like, hey, it's not our job to tell the story or come up with the messaging. It's just our job to create this beautiful delivery, which I get in a way. I mean, there's a core skill set behind execution, yep, right? And being the experts in technology. How did you find that you had the ability to kind of be both, to be creative, but also have this eye on execution? Because sometimes the creative side and the execution side don't go real well together, right?
No, you're absolutely spot on. I think again it kind of comes back to our roots. You always kind of felt I think in the beginning that you needed to be fluent in both the tech and the creative side to it. Mm-hmm. It's different now. I mean, it's much more different now than it was the whole industry than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I think I'm grateful that we had that journey together as a company and going through starting off as the tech side and then really transitioning more to where we are today. But I think, but I'd say to any practitioner today, I mean, it's a tool, I mean, you're designing for this canvas, which is, any of these pieces of technology. And I think to a degree, you need to be familiar with it. You need to know how far you can push the boundaries. Now, I mean, you don't need to be in-depth expert on LED or motion or programming. That's above my pay grade. Sure. And I don't want to take away from others out there that are more efficient in doing that. But I think you need to know enough about it to know how far you can push the technology or use it.
Yeah.
And then it's nice because then it kind of sets you up to have a real in-depth dialogue with an integrator with an idea that hopefully they can build upon to say, did you think about this? And at that point, at least your vision for the whole experience is somewhat shaped, but could be still, polished a bit. How further can I go with a sensor? How further can I go with a particular visual or an element of interactivity that I had not even thought about, but I'm still open to it and there's opportunity to plan for it. I just feel like that has to happen. I mean, you have to send your teams out there to shows to look at the technology and just play around with it. I feel like you need to be fluent in both these days. And I think the same thing too both sides. The integrators need to be a bit understanding of different ways designers approach the use of the technology, and also how they design the visuals that go onto it as well. So you just even more so today, it's just so important to understand both sides.
Yeah, one of the biggest misses I've seen, and I can't say where or who did it, or what the manufacturer was, but talking to a client where the workflow of how you produced content for this experience was really never discussed.
Yeah.
And so then they come up to having this technically beautiful and perfectly executed piece of technology that the people in the building can't create new experiences for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're very frustrated by it because it meets, on paper, it meets everything they want to do,
Yeah.
right? Because whoever they had interfaced with really didn't understand enough to ask them how they created content and what their workflow was and what kind of resources they had on staff. They really didn't put together something that they could manage long term, which
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that happens. It's
yeah.
it's a shame that you see projects to where you can tell that it was a bit of an afterthought, or it was X amount of dollars left over to do something. And it's a shame. I still think we do tend to put more value on the tech than we do the creative.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't know. And I think maybe that's just because with the technology, it's something tangible. You can hold on to it. And on the creative side, it's it's a media, it's a file, it's something you can text to someone, or you can share on YouTube. I don't know. I think that's part of the problem. And I think it's, you get 100K gets you a minute's worth of 3D, and like that's to some people that's crazy. It's a minute's worth of video, and yet I have this screen that I can stare at. But reality, at the end of the day, if you don't spend the money on the creative, you have a black screen, like the one behind me right now.
Yeah, there you go. So you mentioned, that things have been changing rapidly, and obviously the industry changes, and as equipment changes, and as technology gets better, and all these things, there are a ton of things that we can do today that, like you said, 10, 15 years ago, we couldn't do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like LED was very low resolution, not accessible in price or scale. Projection really didn't have contrast or longevity for digital signage because of bulbs and roll off and all these things that now laser is kind of fixed, and different coatings and films and all these things that are now going for ambient light rejection and those. Do you with all that and all this opportunity, do you see I guess a new opportunity for, in a world where things seem to be going towards like an online marketplace, online experiences, online consumption, for people to really use this in an effort to reestablish place? I mean, like, if you're going to build brick and mortar, you want to create a destination. I mean, you want to be in this place-making business.
Yep.
Do you see the technology being like ripe for people who really want to reinforce a physical location to be able to do that? And where do you think that opportunity is right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the technology's always been ripe for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say. I mean, there's every year there's advancements. Every year I think we make excuses and saying the technology cost is even lower, and the reality is it's been dropping for years. This is nothing new. And I think what's really changed is that from those that are designing the place, I think they're bringing in these hybrid designers, kids that are coming out of school that are exposed to both tech and design. Yeah. And they're designing to what they feel they should have in the space. So they technology is second nature to them.
Yep.
And so they can automatically in their mind justify the use of X. And so I think more of that's happening. And I think at the same time too, I think the clients that own the space are realizing that their audience is changing. They need to cater to that, whatever that is. And now they're coming to the table with a budget. And so what that budget is, I can see them still, up that a little bit, but they're coming prepared to have that conversation. Whereas years ago, they weren't. But I really think those that are designing the space, they're the ones that are holding the real cards to seeing more of these activations take place. And that's across the board. I'm not just alienating that to one particular vertical. That's retail, that's transportation, that's themes, that's museums. I mean, that's all across the board. It's those guys are the ones that are starting to dictate, and I think that's why we're seeing more of this now.
So with that, do you find it like, how do you think you strike the perfect balance between, tech and physical space? I mean, like when you're talking about museums, I used to be on the museum side, and I've told the story a few times, but the main thing is on the museum side is that, people come to see the artifact, right? They
Yeah.
come to see the building, they come to see the church, they come to see, we looked at Sloss Furnace in Alabama as a potential museum site. I mean, they come to see this historic site, place, or thing, and then you really want to use tech to augment and to attract or to add other layers of information.
Mhm.
How do you guys sit with somebody and say, hey, we don't want to we understand you're excited about technology and what it can do for you, but we want to make sure we strike this balance between honoring the space and using the tech.
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost, I think you got to figure out what's the purpose. I mean, does it add to the experience? I think there's a lot of times when you'll see something added onto it where does it really provide you more insight
Yeah.
to learning about something? It's sometimes it's forced. Sometimes spaces do just a perfect job on their own, and there's many examples of great exhibit design that doesn't need it, because like you said, some artifacts are just I don't need anything around it, like the Mona Lisa. Like, what would you do? I mean, it's I think things like that you just don't need it. But then I think there are examples where people want to learn more about the story. They want to learn more about why, and I think there's an element where the interactivity helps to augment that or create more emotion, or do things of that nature. Yeah, there's good examples out there to where it is needed to provide that extra layer. But it all comes back to purpose and relevancy. Is there
Yeah.
a purpose? Is it relevant? And do you as the guest want that? Are you going in there expecting to see that?
Yeah, it's almost like you don't want to create a forced consumption model.
Yeah.
And you want to offer something unique. Like I always tell people, like the worst thing you could do is spend $10,000 on an interactive display and then put your website up on it for people to surf your trade show booth. It's like,
No,
nobody.
it's absolutely true. I mean, you think of all these great spaces. I mean, you go to Disney World and you expect it.
Yeah.
But you go to MoMA and like, I don't want it. You go to an airport and you're like, yes, I need it. But then if you go to a historical, transportation building and you're like, I don't want it. And so it's like that. I mean, it's always gonna, certain museums, it's just like you want it. And then, I mean, here we are September and I'm thinking the 9/11 museum, it's done tastefully, it augments that story. And I think people go in there somewhat expecting it, but not to the degree the way it's delivered. It's delivered very tastefully.
It's the most impressive room, just AV wise, something very, very, very simple AV wise, in the basement, in
Mhm.
the room where they have the pictures of all the victims of 9/11.
Yep.
And in the middle there's that dark room with 4 benches kind of like around the outside in a square.
Yeah.
And the floor is glass and you can see the gravel from below the foundation. And they're just playing people talking, telling a minute story about a relative they lost, about something funny that happened or something they did, or the last time they saw them at a barbecue. And you sit in that room and it's probably 4 speakers and a projector putting an image of somebody up on one of the walls with their name.
Yep.
Probably $4,000 worth of AV in that room?
Yeah, no, it's not overly done. But there's a good example of striking the balance.
Yeah.
Especially in a very sensitive environment like that. But again, it's striking the balance. It's just knowing how much you need to deliver in order to just make the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's a very well done space. I even took pictures of the doors that said AV equipment room just to document where the gear did sit in the museum. And I don't think I've seen the latest reiteration because I was there about 4 years ago, I think was last time. So I think they've done a couple extra things since then.
That's about when I was there last on that. So it's a hard one to go through.
It is. It's heavy. It's super heavy. So.
Yeah.
So we see that in museums and things. Do you think there's another industry right now that's one of those industries that could really gain some value from thinking about how they're using space and technology more, as opposed to, just putting up a square building with some lights? I mean, is there an industry out there that you think's ripe for the benefits of technology and storytelling?
Um, I'm not gonna go down the path of retail. I think that's probably been over talked about, and let's leave that one alone. Um, I think maybe, I mean, transportation, I think could be a little bit better, just given the movement of certain terminals being more of quote unquote destination kind
Yep.
of environments, or at least waiting. They're like malls. I mean, they're lifestyle centers. I do think lifestyle centers. Speaking on, I'll go into that. I think lifestyle centers, and everyone's getting away from the regular mall as we know it, to where these more environments, and there's a lot of sights and sounds, and
Mhm.
more stressing on sort of a quote, kind of like a community experience.
Yeah.
These community centers. So I think more of those kind of open environments are definitely ripe for
Yeah.
doing more, whether it's from just unique kind of architectural type of installations, to where there's a little bit more social engagement, activations to where you feel part of the whole experience, or something you're doing is maybe impacting the way it's visualized.
Yep.
So I think those environments are, and I gotta be honest, that the last one I'm gonna throw for a little curveball: breweries. It's I'm not just saying that,
Yeah.
but I was I thought about that because I was in Louisville about a month or so ago, and went to a couple. How could you not? A couple of them, and there's a great story behind all the brands that are down there.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's some that have really nice tasting rooms, and there's some where you would like to know a bit more, because either it's not delivered by the people that are supposed to be the tour guides that are telling you it. And I feel like there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of archived information that they have of the first bottle, or how the label was pressed, or the process behind it. And so I think those kind of, because those are ones that I don't think you think about. I mean, you go in a brewery and you see what's on the tap list, but then
Yeah.
it's this whole story about where did it start, and how is it processed, and what makes them different. And so yeah,
I think that's awesome.
that's my curveball for the day. So
That's a great idea. I could even see something where like every pint had its own coaster, like an
yeah,
AR coaster, and you could, if you wanted to, just sitting
so
there.
that would be really cool. That
Then
would be
if you get the West Coast IPA, the coaster it goes on is that, and as you scan it with the AR, it tells you a little bit about how it was brewed and where it came from and who had the
yeah,
idea, who the
yeah.
brewmaster was, and be kind of cool, like almost like the 19 Crimes wine stuff, right?
There you
Yeah.
go. Awesome.
That's really cool. I hadn't thought about, it's funny, Gensler did a big study on why people use public space,
Mhm.
and or even go to a mall in the first place. And really, like, 60-70% of people that even go to a place like that have social intention.
Yeah.
It's not just to fulfill a need and buy a product or to be a consumer. It's actually to have a social experience and a social interaction. So that idea of creating more lifestyle spaces as opposed to consumer centric spaces,
Well,
right?
that's the whole point with that. I think that the word lifestyle, I mean, it's
Yeah.
away from a mall. I mean, it's supposed to be something that is part of your everyday. I mean,
Yeah.
hence the lifestyle. And I think I'm not familiar with the Gunther study, but I'd seen other things too, where people are gravitating to these type of environments because it's not the square, bit. You don't feel as pressured to shop. I mean, some of it is just to enjoy, because there's now, live music, there's a garden, there's activities for the kids, there is, the pond that the kids can play with, the splashing pond the kids can play with. I mean, there's things like that make it more enjoyable as a family outing.
Yeah.
Versus we're going to keep them stuck in a mall all day. So now there's the outdoor part of it. And so, yeah, and I think there's so much of an element there. And I think to some degree too, they try to tell stories with it. They try to
Yeah.
tell a community story. I know there's a few that are happening around here in New Jersey, and North American Properties is building one, and they built Avalon in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, which is, it's community focused environment with retail mixed into it. But it's that mix, it's providing something back to you. And I think the hope is that you share something back to it. And
Yeah.
technology, there's that opportunity.
Sure. Yeah. When I lived in Arizona, there was a neighborhood called Agritopia. So
Okay.
it's this gentleman who had started coffee plantation and Joe's Real Barbecue and some businesses that were pretty big in Arizona.
Yep.
He had a family farm, and they took that plot of acres of land and they turned it into a neighborhood. But the
Okay.
neighborhood actually had a community farming area. They had a restaurant that used the community farm to provide, farm to fork type.
Is this the area out in like Gilbert, right?
Yeah.
Because Joe's Farm Grill.
Yep. Joe's Farm Grill is is right by
Oh, no,
Agritopia.
I didn't know that was called. Okay, and they have that really cool. There's the hangar next
Yep.
to the farm grill. It's like a maker's spot. There's a brewery in there.
Yes, but that whole area was really kind of designed in that same way, and even the height of the fences are such on the houses where you see your neighbor when you're in your backyard. So like if they're out watering their flowers in the backyard, the fences are only 4.5 to 5 feet tall, so
Okay.
private separation, but not complete privacy where you don't see people. So you don't get Wilson's, just his eyeballs over the top. You could talk to him face to face, over the fence in the backyard and things like that. So it was a very interesting concept to try to build this community. It wasn't technology specifically, but like you said, they have a maker space, they have a brewery, they have a restaurant, they have a community farm, it's a really cool way to do it. And they were doing that I think, actually it was probably 15 years ago they started that space.
Yeah,
So.
it's been around for a while.
Well, cool. Well, hey, as a closing question, I want to ask everybody. I'm a big. I guess I'm a big. I don't know. I observe a lot of things when I'm out, right? And as I look around, I go, oh man, if I had only owned this, or if this was my business, this is I really think they're missing a huge opportunity to tell a story here about either how they were founded, or about this space, or about this building, or the
Mhm.
history of this area. Have you ever been to somewhere where, as you dug in, you really fell in love with this particular space or piece of architecture, and you really felt like they were missing an opportunity to tell a good story? And if so, where was that?
Um, I think I'm a well, yeah. I'll go to the roots. I mean, I'm a big baseball guy, which I think was apparent that day as I was wearing a cap. Yeah, I think there are stadiums that do miss the mark on the history and the legacy of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also from a fan participation aspect of it. I mean, it's hard to put my finger on one particular stadium. I'll go with my beloved Phillies. I think they could do a better job at Citizens.
Okay.
I think the history it's scattered, but I think there could be a little bit more consistency in the way that it's brought forward. And I think from the crowd itself, I mean, there's a lot of I mean, it's an older ball club, and I think there's an opportunity for the base to get more pulled into the game, or just pulled into the legacy of the team, than maybe what's happening with it. But I think stadiums in general, I think NFL stadiums, there's some, I think US Bank does a better job. It's only a couple of years old, that are doing better jobs of that kind of social fan interaction, or from the media perspective.
Yeah.
But I think baseball could use a bit more of a sprucing up in some stadiums.
Sure.
That's what I would say. I mean, I guess I guess at the root of it is that if there's such a history to something, why hide it?
Yeah.
Why keep it only online? I guess that's the bigger one. It's why do you have to have this experience only where I can enjoy it really at its fullest at my house? If I'm lucky, you have a good mobile site, but I don't want to walk through a space with my head down. So give me a little bit of it when I'm actually at the space.
Yeah, and I would think it would convert more, right? Like if you create a space that's like that, where somebody's learning something, where somebody feels like they're getting something that they can only get from there,
Mhm.
they'll still buy the $20 ticket in the third balcony, even though they get a better view from their TV at home,
Yep.
because they want to be in the space. They want to be in this historic, in the historic building, or they want to be part of that fan experience or learn something new. We always, when I did museums, we always thought, like there are a lot of people that are walking through that aren't passionate about paleontology. So how do you, take that one little moment in time to maybe catch somebody on fire,
Yeah.
right? For something. So somebody shows up to watch, let's say somebody shows up at a Phillies game because they're a Braves fan,
Yeah.
and and they're the visiting team, and all of a sudden, they're a transplant. They've never really invested in the local team, and all of a sudden they learn some history or a story that really catches them on fire for something they didn't know about. I mean, it just seems like such a great opportunity. That's great. I appreciate that. Well, awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming in with me. I think what you guys do over there is amazing, blending the creative and the tech in a way that brings places to life. I'm a big fan of your guys' work and places like Moment Factory and just different places that are really trying to do these activations. And I appreciate you coming and sitting with me for a little bit.
No, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure. Very enjoyable.
Awesome. So if people want to find you, where do they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to openeyeglobal.com, and then we are very active on Instagram and Twitter, again, at openeyeglobal for both. And then I have a personal Twitter, it's Bryan Meszaros. Okay. And you can there's always something on there that we're posting, our adventures behind the scenes.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, hey, this has been Co.Lore Podcast with Bryan Meszaros from OpenEye Global. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.